source tells us some public utility drivers are now forced to stop operations as fuel expenses leave them with no take-home pay.
This gasoline station now sells diesel for 79 pesos and 10 centavos per liter, while gasoline is up to more or less 76 pesos per liter. Prices exceed 80 pesos in other fuel companies. Some jeepney drivers are now forced to stop operations, like 62-year-old Rogelio Galos, after serving passengers from Manila to Pasay Tuesday morning.
Ang ikot ko 350, ang diesel ko 450. Nirahin na lang dito. Tambay. Abunado ka pa. Wala, tablaan na lang. Hindi tayo gutom.
Transport Group Piston says it's not staging a transport strike for now, but some drivers are left with no choice.
Napipilitan na huminto pansamantala na hindi maiiwasan sa hinaharap na magkaroon talaga ng tigil pasada.
Piston, along with labor and youth organizations, are calling on President Duterte to take action in the remaining days of his term. They want him to suspend fuel excise tax for at least 6 months and call for a special session of Congress to review the oil deregulation law.
Gusto namin magbalik paaralan, pero what are the practical concerns na kinakaharap namin? Presyo ng pagkain, presyo ng pamasahe, di ba? Yung unbearable living cost.
Also, an appeal for the incoming Marcos administration.
Sana naman, huwag niya tularan yung pinalitan niya. Yung mga pangako niya, gawin niya.
The government has offered assistance in the form of fuel subsidy and a compensation program. But drivers say the 6,500 peso aid they have received is long gone. They also lament delays in their salaries under the service contracting program.
Hirap kasi, pamahal ng pamahal. Yung subsidy, kunti lang tulong. Ilang kargahan lang yun, ubus na kagad.
The LTFRB says more than 200,000 drivers and operators have received the fuel subsidy. That's 75% of the total number of beneficiaries under the first tranche initially set for March. Some 20,000 delivery riders have also benefited from the program. Tricycle drivers have to wait a bit longer with payouts eyed for next week. The second round of aid initially promised for April is now targeted for next month, according to the LTFRB. Amor Santos, CNN Philippines.
Malacanang attributes the increase in hunger to higher fuel prices, which has caused prices of basic commodities to go up as well. A recent social weather station survey shows 3.1 million or 12.2% of Filipino families experienced hunger in the first quarter of 2022. That's higher than the 11.8% hunger rate seen in a similar survey done in December last year. Acting presidential spokesperson Martin Andanar says the government continues to address hunger through livelihood projects, among other programs.
Kasama sa ating initiatives ang gulayan sa barangay at sa pamayanan programs at iba pang livelihood projects para mabawasan ang kagutuman. Kaya naman, bagaman may pagtaas sa bilang ng mga pamilyang Pilipino na nakakaranas ng gutom, mas mababa pa rin ng 12.2% ngayong Abril sa 16% nung huling bahagi ng 2020.
Aside from costly fuel, higher PhilHealth contribution is another thing that worries many people, particularly overseas Filipino workers. Tristan Odalo tells us how they marked Migrant Workers' Day.
Nearly 3 decades since the law seeking to protect migrant workers was passed in 1995 following the execution of OFW Flor Contemplacion, but same old problems persist, according to an OFW group. On Tuesday, Migrante Philippines held a protest in front of the Migrant Workers Department to oppose the mandatory contribution hike in PhilHealth imposed to OFWs. They say this is an additional burden to Filipino workers who are still trying to recover from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Based on their computation, an OFW may spend 9,600 to 38,400 pesos a year due to the new contribution rates. They also call on the incoming Marcos administration to address the plight of OFWs, their call for just wages, benefits, and justice.
Marami pa ring sadlak sa abuso, marami pa ring namomroblema kung paano ipagtatanggol yung kanilang karapatan. lagana pa rin ang illegal recruitment. Dapat alisin yung lahat ng mga paniningil sa mga umaalis na mga Pilipino. 27 years after, eto kami. At dumadanas at tatanggap ng mga bagong singilin mula sa gobyerno sa forma ng PhilHealth, sa forma ng SSS at Pag-ibig contribution.
Meantime, a Thanksgiving Day was held by the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration (NCR) in Pasay City to recognize the contribution of OFWs to the economy. Financial literacy and business opportunities were offered to them.
Kung nadidinig ninyo yung mga pronouncements ni Pangulong Duterte at even ni incoming Pangulong BBM, malakas po ang kanilang mensahe patungkol sa proteksyon sa mga OFWs, di lang OFWs, kundi OFW families.
Labor Chief Silvestre Bello also urged OFWs to consider going back home. The government has several reintegration programs for returning OFWs, including livelihood assistance. OFW groups remain hopeful that their sector will improve now that there's a Department of Migrant Workers. Incoming Migrant Workers Chief Susan Tuz Ople will be taking the helm, and transition meetings have been initiated. Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
Officials report over 20 million pesos worth of agricultural damage days after the eruption of Mount Bulusan in Sorsogon. Joining us live is Stanley Gahete, who is still keeping watch on the situation in the province. Stanley, how are farmers coping with yet another crisis?
My farmers here in Huban, Sorsogon admit they are clueless on how to recover from damage caused by volcanic eruption as Bulusan remains restive. The local agriculture office says the eruption has damaged more than 800 metric tons of crops. Coconut plantations suffered the most with losses in more than 3,000 hectares. Next is palay or paddy rice with 1,400 hectares and nearly 300 hectares of vegetables, fruits and other crops. Agriculture officials say they are preparing assistance for the farmers.
Tapos mga bagong pananim nun, siyempre pinaggastusan nila yun. Malulugi sila dahil mamamatay yung mga pananim nila. Lugi po kami kasi yung pinagbila namin yung pananim, baliwala na yun.
Meron kami mga nakaatang na pantanim para po sa mga ganitong cases. Certified and hybrid palay seeds, meron din pong vegetable seeds, and pati po yung drugs and biologics para sa mga affected animals.
Meanwhile, aid keeps coming for people displaced by Bulusan's eruption. Police have put up a desalination machine in Barangay Puting Sapa to provide clean water.
Every time na meron pong disaster, ay dinedeploy po natin ng mga to. For now, ito po ay manatili po dito dahil wala pong masasabi na malinis na tubig para po sa ating mga kababayan.
Fire Bureau personnel help in the ash cleanup on roads, houses and even crops. Relief workers provide food packs, while the DICT and other telcos provide internet connection in the evacuation area.
Nagpapasalamat kami at maraming tumutulong. Dito sa Huban, mahirap ito mga lugar. Ito kasi ang catch basin sa Jerusalem.
Evacuees are safe and no one is sick. Government volcanologists have recorded 7 volcanic earthquakes within 24 hours, and people still fear for their lives as there's no telling when Bulusan will erupt next. But they are also eager to return to their normal lives soon. And that's the latest here in Sorsogon. Back to you, Mai.
Thank you, Stanley Gahete, reporting live from Sorsogon. Experts have found groundwater in 8 towns and 1 city in Batangas contain high arsenic levels. George Cahiles explains how harmful this could be for people in the province south of Metro Manila.
Christine Blanco, a resident of Barangay Sinisian, East Lemery, Batangas, drinks a glass of water straight from the tap. The water may be crystal clear, but little does she know, there are harmful chemicals invisible to the naked eye.
Nasanay na hong yun ang iniinom at saka malinis naman.
The local government says water sources in 9 towns of Batangas have high arsenic level that can really be harmful to people's health, including the groundwater in Barangay Sinisian East. The World Health Organization recommends arsenic content in water should not exceed by 10 micrograms per liter limit.
Arsenic is a carcinogenic chemical by IARC. Yung standards na yon. And so, in time, you might develop cancer. There are some water sources that are safe, and there are some that should not be drunk. So, hindi siya pwedeng inumin, hindi rin siya pwedeng pangluto.
Ang aking asawa nagkasakit, pero ngayon naman awa ng Diyos na-recover. Hindi ko lang po alam kung saan nagmula yun.
Experts say excessive intake of arsenic may cause vomiting, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. Long-term exposure to high levels of arsenic may cause bigger problems.
Even with less than 6 months exposure to drinking arsenic in water, you might develop skin symptoms. You will develop a lot of diseases like cancer of the lungs, cancer of the bladder, and then exacerbation of your diabetes. So, nag-worsen yung diabetes, hypertension.
Experts say boiling cannot remove arsenic in water. Thus, they ask people in affected areas to use either purified or distilled water for drinking and cooking.
Ang mga tao ay nabili na ng mineral water para sa kanilang pagluluto, ginagamit. Ang problema lamang ay doon sa mga tao na talagang walang kakayanan para bumili talaga ng mineral water dahil hindi pare-pareho ang mga tao. Lalo pa ngayon na nag-pandemic, walang trabaho ang iba.
The Batangas Medical Center Toxicology Unit have already tested 104 residents in affected areas. 11 were found to have traces of arsenic in their urine samples. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
George Cahiles will tell us how local officials are helping residents in the second part of this report. More news ahead. The country records new cases of the more transmissible Omicron subvariants. And President Duterte has this parting message to Filipinos more than 3 weeks before he steps down from Malacanang. Details next on Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao, para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
To Newsnight. More cases of 2 highly transmissible Omicron subvariants. Health experts flag a slight uptick in COVID-19 infections in Metro Manila. Carolyn Bonkin reports officials are working to keep cases low while the president speaks up on suggestions to make masks optional outdoors.
Virgel Valdez was among the thousands laid off when the pandemic hit in 2020. Today, his new job as store assistant is stable, with more and more clients coming back. Virgel thinks vaccination and mask wearing help contain COVID-19 cases, which means he gets to keep his job.
Mas muna. Siyempre, mas maganda yung patagalin muna natin yung pagpamas kahit mga 1 taon. Gano'n. Para at least safety. Face mask talaga. Huwag na face shield.
Despite suggestions making mask optional outdoors, the president wants to keep it mandatory at least until his term ends. He says compliance with masking and getting vaccinated help the economy running.
And to think na yung iba,
sa ngayon nagkaroon ng surge, maybe the citizens of that country do not want to follow regulations. Tayo dito, sabi ko, takot. Kasi mahirap lang nga tayo. At bigyan pa rin yung wala ng trabaho, masakit lahat ang tao. The economy can never recover.
The IATF allows the public to remove masks when dining, when doing outdoor exercises, or participating at sports events in well-ventilated venues. DOH officials say the pandemic isn't over yet, and masks will help keep infections at bay, especially with new variants surfacing. In checking 190 samples, the Philippine Genome Center and RITM discovered more Omicron subvariant cases. 3 BA.5 and 7 BA.2.12.1. 2 persons with BA.5 are from Calabarzon. All BA.5 cases had COVID in May and have recovered.
We can say na wala tayo mga international sources for BA.5. So pag ganito ang tinitingnan natin, mataas ang probability na meron tayong local transmission. We still need further evidence for us to be able to confirm.
Mukhang nag-fizzle out naman. We have a lot of hope that yung current vaccination program natin and yung patuloy na natin na paggamit ng ating masks will be successful.
New BA.2.12.1 cases are from NCR, Ilocos Region, Cagayan Valley, Calabarzon, and Bicol. Though still at low risk for COVID-19, DOH and Octa Research see a slight uptick in infections in Metro Manila beginning mid-May.
We can't disregard it kasi yung mga previous surges nagsisimula sila sa mga ganyang upticks. We're hoping na hindi ganun.
Meron tayong mga pagtaas and yes, hindi ito significant. Ang pinaka-importante sa atin ngayon dito sa ating bansa at this stage of the response for the pandemic would be the severe and critical cases.
At least for now, most COVID-19 cases don't require hospitalization. Caroline Bongkin, CNN Philippines.
In other news, the owner of the SUV involved in the hit and run of a security guard in Mandaluyong City did not show up before transport investigators today. Chrissy Dimatulak tells us what authorities will do about this.
A second and final show cause order now requires the SUV owner to comment or explain on Friday, 1 p.m. According to the LTO, the show cause order was accepted by the registered owner of the vehicle. The agency did not disclose, however, whether the registered owner was also the same person behind the wheel during the incident. This is one of the aspects being investigated.
We already given him an opportunity to be heard. So therefore, sir, the case will be resolved based on the evidence at hand. Whether or not mag-appear siya or wala siyang explanation na pinadala sa atin. Based on the available records po, i-resolve po natin.
The driver's license of the SUV owner will also be revoked in case he does not appear for the second time. Earlier, the owner's driver's license was placed under preventive suspension for 90 days. A colleague of Ronaldo describes the current condition of the security guard.
As of now, nasa ICU pa rin siya. Meron lang series of tests na possible na gawin. Nakakapagsalita siya, yes. Medyo garargar kung tawagin nila sa salitang kanto, no. Alam mo yun, medyo hinahatak niya yung hininga.
The Mandaluyong police have already filed charges of frustrated murder and abandonment of one's own victim before a court on Monday. Chrissy Dimatulak, CNN Philippines.
President-elect Bongbong Marcos meets with more ambassadors today. The ambassadors of Germany, Spain, and Morocco paid a courtesy call on him at his campaign headquarters in Mandaluyong. In a quick media briefing, the German envoy said she and Marcos talked about human rights, but they did not discuss President Duterte's request to European nations to cut funding for progressive groups here at home.
We discussed our commitment, or we exchanged about our commitment about Germany's continued commitment in the area of protecting human rights and safeguarding rule of law. We didn't go into details of projects and project funding. As one example of Germany's commitment, I mentioned Germany's funding of the UN Joint Programme on Human Rights.
Other topics discussed during their meeting include renewable energy, climate change, and food security, among others. Outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte calls on Filipinos to support the incoming Marcos administration. In what he described as his parting message, Duterte said Filipinos must respect the majority's decision in that there should be no room for politicking or divisive actions.
Me, wala na ako. I will say nothing. Ang ayaw ko, baka may maiwan pa yung namumuliti ka pa rin. Or, just plain criticize itong bagong administrasyon. You do not do that. President-elect Marcos would need the cooperation and help of everybody. We must give it to him.
In the same media briefing, Duterte said he will retire from politics once his term ends on June 30. He called on security forces to continue his administration's controversial war on drugs. A conglomerate's mission to remove thousands of tons of waste from two of the country's most polluted rivers continues to gain support. Joining the effort is a Japanese firm that wants to fast-track the cleanup for the benefit of communities. Rex Ramito has the details.
Much has been achieved, yet much still needs to be done. San Miguel Corporation vows to ramp up efforts in cleaning up Pasig and Tulyahan rivers. A shipping giant NYK Line donates powerful high-capacity excavators. The equipment is part of the Japanese company's $1.5 million or nearly 80 million peso donation to the conglomerate's initiative.
Okay, Japanese equipment, of my experience, can last for 10 times more than whatever equipment you can buy. So, it's but natural to buy the most reliable equipment.
Surprised to see this the actual operation, and also I respect Mr. and the philosophy to clean up Philippine River.
As San Miguel hires more personnel to help in the cleanup efforts, SMC President and CEO Ramon Ang says he expects to double the amount of excavated garbage and silt. He says they're about to complete dredging and widening efforts in Tulyahan River by next week. So far, San Miguel has excavated garbage and silt equivalent to the capacity of 70,000 dump trucks. Some sections of the Pasig River are now up to 6 meters deep from the previous 3 meters. Dredging activities have gathered trash that can fill up over 30,000 dump trucks.
Let's say instead of 3 years, now with this, we can do 10,000 tons a day. It's maybe less than 2 years, we can finish the whole cleanup.
Ang says water flow in Pasig River will be faster in the future, together with improving flood control in Metro Manila. In the race to clean up river systems, the government is banking on private initiative to make the difference.
We need the private sector and the other government agencies and donors to fast-track all these activities because we are pressed for time.
That is why we in San Miguel committed to rehabilitate the rivers.
Rex Remitio, CNN Philippines.
Stories in sports and entertainment up ahead. SJ Belangel is taking his talents to the Korean Basketball League. But the two-time UAAP men's basketball champ tells us it was not an easy decision. Plus, another hit Korean series is getting a season 2 on Netflix. Details when we return on Newsnight.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini Tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
iPhone users can look forward to a bunch of new functions with the latest update to Apple's mobile operating system. With iOS 16, you will soon be able to edit or unsend iMessages and personalize your lock screen with live updates, like those from ongoing sports games. No word yet on when Apple will drop iOS 16, but word is out, it's likely later this year. In sports, Ateneo standout SJ Belangel is set to make some big moves, heading to the pros and becoming the first Filipino import in the Korean Basketball League. Belangel confirmed to CNN Philippines' sports desk that he's gearing up to join Daegu Koga's Pegasus in the 2022 and 2023 KBL season. With this, the 23-year-old will forgo his last 2 years playing for the Blue Eagles.
It's a tough scenario for me and for my family. And actually, to be honest, ni Coach Tab wanted me to stay pa talaga. But for me, it's a great opportunity for me to grow as a player and to know more about Korean Basketball League, Korean's culture, and it will help my family as well. Hindi ko talaga ipagpapalit sa anumang na memories namin with the coaches, with my teammates, and everyone in the Ateneo community.
Belangel is also part of the Gilas Pilipinas pool for the third window of the FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers happening later this month. Entertainment news now, there's more to the story of the surviving students from Yosan High School, with Netflix's All of Us Are Dead confirmed for a second season. The Korean zombie series dominated the streaming platform upon its release in January. Season 1 reached the top 10 non-English language shows list in 91 countries. And that's it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Maya Rodriguez sitting in for Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.